Tracy with MeatRx. I'm here today with another success podcast story. We have Dr. Brian Lenzkes. He's an internal medicine doctor based in San Diego, and he's focused much of his attention on clinical nutrition. He has owned his own medical practice and group of physicians since 2004. He's a co-host of popular Low Carb MD podcast, which has more than 1.4 million downloads, and he's a professional speaker. Hi, Dr. Brian.
Hey, Tracy, thanks for having me. This is great. Sean's been so nice, and I actually got to go hang out at his house a little bit. And, just comparing notes as docs, it's really interesting how much we have in common, even though we're in different realms, being a surgeon in his case and an internal medicine doc in mine. So, yeah, I'm really excited. Thank you for having me here. I love what you're doing in the community. It's amazing.
Thank you for coming on with us, and we want to hear all about your success as well. Can you start out by telling us what was life like before you were doing low carb?
Yeah, it really changed. So just as a background, overweight my entire family. I mean, my entire life, my entire family, for the most part, had weight problems, diabetes. My mom's side is a disaster. They all kind of eat, drink, and be merry. That's their motto. They're from a small town in Ohio, and it was just like not much to do except eat and drink. And so I saw the devastation growing up of diabetes and obesity and sleep apnea and amputations and dialysis and all that stuff. And you start wondering, okay, am I just predestined to this? And as a kid, I was overweight. Again, just poor nutrition, stuff we thought was low fat, had a ton of carbohydrates and processed foods and all that, but we thought it was a healthy thing to do, just like the rest of us, following the food pyramid, eating a bunch of rice and bread and that kind of stuff. And so in high school, I played football, so I'm 5'8", so I would beef up as much as I could. I'd be lifting weights and eating whatever to get bigger. But then in wrestling, I'd have to go down from 200 pounds to 165 pounds or 158 pounds. And so I would be starving myself and working out. So then I figured, so I was fit. I see pictures of, I'm like, wow, I was pretty dang in shape back then in wrestling season. Football season, I wasn't, but in wrestling I was. But then after high school, I started gaining weight and gaining weight and thought, okay, I'll just do what I was doing. And I figured I just messed up my metabolism because of and I probably did with, fasting and starving yourself, trying to just make that weight. And then you think, oh, I'm going to eat all this stuff after I weigh in. And then you couldn't eat because you've been fasting for so long that you just can't go back to it. So then you go to med school and residency, and what happens during residency, you learn. In med school, you take a study break here and there, and you all eat something and take a study break. So it becomes an association of relaxation and food. So that wasn't good. And a lot of people in med school and college, they call it the freshman 15, and now it's like the freshman 35 now. It's a problem. So residency, we were trained, you don't know when you're going to eat again. So you'd eat a huge meal. And then maybe 2 hours later say, oh, we had a break. Let's eat again, guys, just in case we don't eat again. Then all of a sudden you're out of whack. And what I noticed early on, and I made this observation, it's like, gosh, when I'm on call, the next day I'm starving all day. And it's probably a combination, and this is a life lesson, of stress, not sleeping, and then eating a bunch of processed foods, right? All those things. And that as time went on, I started realizing I'm gaining weight. I'm working out 6 days a week. I'm doing all this stuff, eating 6 small meals throughout the day. I was having green shakes, gaining weight, and I was pre-diabetic. I'm like, I'm doing all the right stuff and I'm getting worse. And then I came across a patient who lost 40 pounds. And what did he do? Intermittent fasting. So he was doing 2 days a week. He was eating 500 calories or less, no carbs. And the rest of the week, I said, what about the rest of the week? He's like, whatever I want. I said, beer and pizza? He goes, yeah, whatever I want. And I lost 40. I go, that doesn't make sense. Because if you fast on Tuesday, you must eat twice as much on Wednesday. He said, no, I'm not really that hungry. And then I thought about it. I said, yeah, when I was fasting, I wasn't really that hungry. I forced myself to eat and I couldn't eat. So I thought, maybe there's something to it. Then, I started saying, okay, I'm going to cut out processed foods. And I'm going to cut out, I didn't really drink soda very much, but like, if we went on a road trip, we'd get a Slurpee. Like, oh, there's no fat in that. We could have that, and you have some candy here and there and, hot tamales, that kind of stuff. And then I started realizing when I cut those out, I started losing weight. And I lost, within the first month and a half or so, I lost about 30 pounds. And I said, wow, maybe there's something to this. So I started researching more about Jason Fung, about insulin resistance, metabolic disease. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm metabolically sick. So I'm not going to overcome that just by exercising more, because the advice I gave for a lot of years was, Never skip breakfast, which I don't give that advice anymore because I've looked at the data. Eat 6 times a day, not true. The people I've always seen people that were thin that ate twice a day, and they go, "I feel great, and I eat twice a day." It's like, well, you shouldn't do that. You got to start eating more, right? And their spouse who eats 6 times a day is obese, and like, well, do what she's doing. Like, that doesn't make sense. It works for me. So you start looking and say, well, are we giving bad advice? Do I have to reassess this? So I had a couple diabetics. I said, well, we cut out your orange juice that you think is healthy for you, and oatmeal, and let's give you eggs and see what happens. All of a sudden, the sugars get better. They stop shooting insulin in the morning. Then over time, you start seeing people getting better and better. And then we had Dr. Unwin. I don't know if you're familiar. He's one of my favorite people. He reversed himself after 25 years of practice because one of his patients came in and lost a ton of weight. What did she do? Carnivore type diet and lost a ton of weight and reversed her diabetes. And he's stunned. And so we start seeing those things and you say, okay, what do I do now? And so what happened is I would talk to other docs who are doing the same thing, but they're quiet because no one wanted to say anything because at the time, Gary Fettke was going through 3 years of lawsuit and Professor Tim Noakes because they talked about low carb and it was a threat to cereal makers and soda makers and all that kind of stuff. So I was thinking, man, so I just kept it quiet here locally. And I wanted to give a conference on this because I'm having great results myself and clinically with my patients. So I gave a talk at a church here in town and the two keto dudes invited me on to talk about what I was doing. I'm like, okay, I never did a podcast. That will be fun. So I went on there and then all of a sudden our conference went really well. A ton of people, their lives got changed. And I said, I should start my own podcast. So I did with a guy named Tro Kalasian and Jason Fung and Megan Ramos, who works with Jason Fung. And we said, let's get those stories out of people. People who are real patients who've lost 100 pounds or 200 pounds or reversed their diabetes, real doctors who are practicing this medicine and what their clinical experience is. And so now we're up to almost 2 million downloads as of this week. And you think, wow, it's really impacted because people want help. And the great thing is we didn't take any funding from anyone, no sponsors. We paid for it ourselves because we believe and we think Patreon supporters will help us if what we're doing. If it's not working, then we don't do it anymore. But it worked. And so it's resonating. We meet people from all around the world whose lives have been changed, right? By two knuckleheads sitting there talking about what our experience is. So it's exciting to hear your story. We got to talk a little bit before we recorded, and it's amazing. I mean, people need to hear these stories because they think it's not real. They think it can't happen. If you talk to me 3 or 4 years ago about reversing diabetes or putting into remission, I say that's crazy. You can't. And once you have it, you have it and it's done. But now it's like if you say you can't reverse it or put it in remission, depending on the term you select, you're wrong. It's just wrong because we have enough people that I could give you. If you say I'm not telling the truth, I have 20 people we can line up that can talk to you and tell you a different story. And that's when I saw Sean's stuff, Sean Baker's, first don't tell Sean, but I thought this guy's nuts. He's eating all meat. I mean, he's gonna die of heart attack. Then I saw his zero coronary calcium score. I saw his labs. I saw what he's doing. I saw what he's doing, what he's accomplishing. And I thought, well, is he a freak of nature? No, he's not, because I see a lot of other people who aren't Sean Baker that are making drastic health improvements, right? They're seeing drastic mental health benefits, anxiety, because a lot of it comes down to when we're anxious and stressed, what do we turn to? For us that are overweight, food. For other people, it might be alcohol. Other people might be drugs. And so doing the podcast, I've had a huge blessing of meeting a lot of people from different modalities who have seen clinical success. And it's incredible. The ones that have impacted me the most are patients who go from 679 pounds down to 250 pounds, and it's to have a life change like that is dramatic. And, really we're struggling with physician burnout. Why? Because doctors see their patients, they went here to save the world, and they see everyone getting worse and worse. So that's why I'm changing what I do, because I really love, like, hearing your story inspires me today. So I'm different than I was before I met you, and so I think all these people, when you hear their stories, like Tro, he couldn't go on an airplane. He was embarrassed. He couldn't go to a place where amusement park. He couldn't do those things, and it was embarrassing because he couldn't be with his kids. He couldn't do so. So he made a change, and now he can do all that. He's running, marathons now. I mean, it's just amazing what we can do if we give the human body a chance to recover.
Right. That is amazing. And I've always been surprised that food was the whole thing. I tried to fill my body with green smoothies. I think you mentioned that, and because I thought it was healthy, and I could not find the proper human diet. That's what I would like to call it. And so it's incredible. And your success, so you went into low carb and just did it quietly for a while, and then you started telling people about it. So that's awesome. I know
It's
that.
yeah, it's one of those things where you say, well, if I have the answer to something and I hold it to myself because of fear, right? I think that I had enough data that it wasn't out of faith. I'm one of those guys that I don't take chances in life. I'm a doctor. You do what's tried and true, and you don't ruffle feathers. I was just talking to a friend who's an attorney. He said attorneys were taught to question everything. Why is that law that? Why is it this way? Instead of saying, yeah, that's what it is, and we just do it that way. And so in medicine, we just go with the flow, and we just say, okay, they said eat 6 times a day. That's what we're going to tell everyone. Rather than saying it doesn't work that way. And when you change what you're doing, you see success. You're like, uh-oh. Now we got a responsibility to say it's not working. And if I have people come out of insulin, I mean, doctors who laughed at me 2 or 3 years ago are now calling me and say, hey, what's in fasting insulin? How do you do this? What? Because they're seeing patients doing better and they feel great, and they're seeing, Fat Fiction, this movie that just came out. I don't have any financial interest, but I had 5 patients that were on there. And you see their lives, how they are now. And when I talk to them every day, they're bubbling and excited. And I love my job. I mean, doing low carb, I mean, carnivore, all this. As a matter of fact, 2 of my patients with the most success are carnivore, and their labs are getting better. Everything they said would get worse is getting better, and their weight's getting better, and their focus is better, and their mood is better. And a lady, she came off 156 units of insulin a day, no insulin. And now she's saying, well, my BMI is perfect, and what else should I do now, doc? I feel great. Like, she's out hiking and doing stuff. So when you see that stuff, you think, wow, it's how many people are getting amputated. Yeah, because for me, I started looking at the futility of what we're doing. If someone has diabetes and I put them on more and more drugs, it doesn't prevent them from getting amputations, blindness, dialysis, heart attack, stroke, all these things that are causing our system to go under. You say, I want to help the people I can. The other people I can't help. I mean, there's some people that say, I'm just going to do what I'm doing. And okay. But what I find is that people, once they get diabetes, all of a sudden they're my best patient in the world because they're scared now. Now you have a vested interest. Instead of saying, well, I'm not giving them cookies, I like them too much. Like one of my guys just last week, I've been telling him for 3 years, you're going to get diabetes. It's a matter of time. It's going to happen. What you're doing, I'm looking at your numbers. You're a disaster. He gets diabetes, and now he's upset because one of his medicines, I was shocked. It's a medicine that's been around for $400 a month. For that medicine. Then he needs another medicine. It's $200 a month. So that's $600 a month. That, gosh, I'd rather go do something fun with that money than buy drugs to survive because I'm unwilling to change what I do. So all of a sudden, the price of donuts they're not as cheap as they look, right? When you look at the ramifications of the disasters that happens. So that's the thing, is when people are educated and they really understand, they say, okay, it's not a big deal anymore. It's not the thing is, we've really gotten so stuck on this willpower thing. We said, okay, you're obese because you don't have willpower. A lot of obese people have massive willpower. They just have been given bad advice. So if you're hooked on alcohol, it doesn't mean you're stupid if you can't get off alcohol. It means you're addicted to alcohol. Same thing we're seeing with processed food and sugar. If you're addicted, we got to work on that problem. We can't just put our head in it and say you're weak. It's not that you're weak. It's this. It's so, if you think about it, Thanksgiving, if you have someone who's an alcoholic that comes over, you don't say, here, just have one drink, be strong, right? You say, don't drink. I mean, you be respectful of that person. But if someone has a problem with chocolate cake, you don't say, here, eat it. No, I don't want to, have one taste. Then all of a sudden they're off the rails for a month because they have an addiction problem, right? Or they're depressed, and that helps them feel a little bit better temporarily, but then they feel bad about themselves. So, I think that there's so much to this. It's not that simple, but it's not that complicated either. If we have good interventions and we can really watch people and help them, we can make some huge inroads.
True. So what all kind of benefits did you notice as you did low carb? You lost weight, I think you mentioned, and was there other ones?
I put on muscle mass. I've lost weight. My mental focus is great. And guess what? I used to stress out. Like, it would be lunchtime and I'm busy, and I would shove food down my face just to eat something. Just grab cookies or well, not cookies necessarily, but whatever I could grab that I thought was somewhat helpful. But you realize, hey, if you're snacking all day, all that adds up, and it causes a problem too. Even if you're eating nuts, there's a fair amount of carbs in that, and that's why more of the carnivore. It's hard to eat too much steak. And so Rob Sivas, who's a good friend of mine, who's a gastric bypass surgeon, I was debating the point with him 2 years ago, and he said, look, it's an addiction problem. I said, well, it's not addiction. It's social. It's a lot. He said, okay, Brian, if you go to an all-you-can-eat steakhouse, a Brazilian steakhouse, you eat steak till you're full, and then the guy brings you another steak. What do you tell him? Like, I'm full. I can't have any more. Give it to someone else or wrap it up for me tomorrow. I'm not eating anymore. I'm done. But that same person will come up and give you a piece of your favorite dessert, and you'll eat the whole thing without even thinking about it, with way more calories than was in the original steak that you would have eaten. Why? Because it's an addiction problem. And so he went through study after study saying that. And the other thing that's intriguing from his perspective, and when you look at the data, if someone's morbidly obese and they get a gastric bypass surgery, guess what goes up? Depression, suicide, alcohol abuse, drug abuse, pornography abuse, shopping addiction, divorce rate 95% in 5 years. You think, why? Why is that? They should have hope and they should be happy. Well, because you've taken their drug of choice, which was those cookies, and when they get stressed out or someone treats them bad. Now they can't do that. What do? Okay, I'll smoke something, or I'll drink something, or I'll, cheat on my husband online, whatever it is. So they're looking for that fix. And so we have to look at it that way. And that's one thing that I've noticed in the carnivores. As a matter of fact, there was one of my low carb MD podcast, number 13, someone who was struggling with everything. He struggled with everything, obesity, diabetes, and he went carnivore, and all that changed. And that was when I was really impressed, because at that time, we were a new podcast, and I didn't want to be controversial. I wanted to say, hey, here's our experience. But when he spoke and you hear his story, think, wow. So people struggling with alcohol and drugs and life and in general, I say, listen to that podcast. My patients I say, listen to that one, because what he did is, instead, it wasn't Will. He just started doing carnivore because he wanted to lose some weight, and he wasn't even thinking about the other stuff. And then a month later, he's sitting there saying, gosh, I haven't looked at pornography. And he was he's a Christian guy. He had prayer groups, everyone trying to help him, support groups every week, and he was a disaster. And he said, I gave that up and I stopped drinking. I haven't had a drink in a month. He goes, I haven't even missed it. And he wasn't like he was saying, I'm using this for that purpose. It was just a side effect. And then the response to that podcast, we had hundreds of people say, same thing happened to me, same thing happened to me, same thing happened to me. And addictions and problems they couldn't get over, they doing carnivore, they got better. So all of a sudden that made me a believer, right? And when I saw Sean Baker having a 0 coronary calcium, I say, well, maybe he's not as crazy as I thought, because he knew the data, and he was looking at saying high insulin level and a high LDL is bad. But once you drop your insulin level and you're metabolically healthy, that changes things. It's a different environment. So, I credit Sean. I like Sean a lot too. And, I know he can get heated with people, but I understand he's under attack constantly, and I get it's not about health a lot of the time. It's more about ideology, if you don't agree with someone. But gosh darn it, it's not natural to wish poor health on people, or that hope their family has bad outcomes, and that it's just not very nice. And so I think it's one of those things where we all learn from each other, and we say, okay, what's reasonable, what's not? Is Sean reasonable? Yeah, he is. I mean, I can't argue with him. I'm looking at his data. If his coronary calcium was through the roof, I would have said, Sean, I would have called him and said, Sean, reassess what you're doing, because what we have to do is look at the data and look at the outcomes and all that. So I think that's an important thing, is saying, okay, let's reassess what I'm doing. Do I keep doing it because 40 years ago they said it was the right thing? If it's not working, you got to change it. You got to change it. That's why we're so sick. If our population was healthy and everyone was great, say, okay, it's working, let's keep doing what we're doing. But it's not. Clearly, everyone knows that, and it's not just because we have too many video games, right? The animals in New York City are getting fat. Why? Because they're eating our food that's left over. They're eating the pizza and the bread and the French fries and all that stuff, and they get fat. The ones in the country aren't getting fat. Why? Or are they watching too much TV? No, it's not. It's the addictive properties of the food. It's a big issue. The more real food you eat, the better you do. That's the bottom line. I mean, that's what, they say this is scary and dangerous. Guess what? Back in the 50s and 40s, people were eating real food. They didn't have all the stuff we have now. They couldn't just go to McDonald's every day, So it's those kind of things where you start realizing, okay, let's change what we're doing and see what happens. And I've had people do their hamburgers, they just wrap them in lettuce, and they reverse their diabetes. And they do that. They give up the soda and they give up the fries. Does that make it dangerous all of a sudden? That same hamburger that would have been with all the other stuff, it doesn't. You're subtracting the bad stuff and eating what makes you feel well and makes you feel satiety, where you don't have to eat a ton all day long.
Yeah, it's incredible that we don't look at people as really being addicts when you have sugar, because everybody has sugar, it seems like, in the world, but it truly is an addiction.
Yeah, and there's Joan Iflin wrote a whole book on it, 492 pages or something, all documented scientifically. But it's a tough one, because people don't want to admit that. You don't want to admit that you're hooked on something, but you know, it's the reality is this. If your sugar's 400 and you still need to have cookies, there's something wrong because you clearly do not need more sugar in that system. It's an addiction and that makes you feel better, right? So the more people get that point, once they realize, look, I'll feel a lot better if I go for a walk with my spouse around the block, or I deal with my stress in a different way. If I have some green tea or whatever makes you have a black coffee, you know, having a bridge, something to replace that. But a lot of times we know, I mean, people will tell you, I mean, anyone listening, if you're getting into a project that you're really engrossed in, you can work all day without eating. You don't even think about food because you're so engrossed. Like I've worked in the yard. My wife said, honey, it's 6 o'clock. You didn't eat yet today. I was like, oh yeah, I want to get this thing done. I'm working. So, you know, it's so much of it as we sit, and this is my concern with COVID, is that people are sitting in their house, they're stressed, they're watching the news all day. They say, I'm hungry. Let me grab a cook. Trust me, I'm in that boat. I eat low carb and mostly carnivore now, but you know, I can see that when I'm at work all day, I'm busy. I don't have time to eat, and I don't even think about it. But I'm sitting there watching a football game. Maybe I'll say, oh, you know, I'll grab some macadamia nuts or something, you know, that kind of thing. So when you start realizing, you know, Rob Sivas, who again is a good friend of mine, he said, snacking is always an emotional event. And when he said that, I was like, oh gosh, darn it. He's right. You know, because usually you don't need, you have energy. We have fat stores we can run on. So why am I snacking? You know, sometimes it's social and you want to be part of the group. But, you know, I think sometimes we just get bored and, you know, stressed and go, okay, I need something right now. I've had days like that. And so now I try to substitute, because if you think about it, if you have a can of tuna fish sitting there, just open the can and eat it, you're less likely to be hungry than if it's barbecued ribs or something that you really have a desire for. So I think that's something we have to learn, like what are our triggers and what is my weakness? For me, I got fat on chips and salsa and tortillas, you know, right? I mean, because I like them. Does that mean I never have a tortilla? Well, if I'm in Guatemala in the middle of the jungle and someone makes me a tortilla handmade from there that they grind it down, I'm not going to be rude and say no, but I'm not going to have 5 of them, right? And I might not even have it sometimes. I may just have it sit on my plate, whatever. So I think it's one of those things where you realize, okay, let me do what works for me. And, you know, as I tell Sean, he could get away with way more carbohydrates than I can. I'm built metabolically resistant, insulin resistant. So he's insulin sensitive with his muscle mass and all that. Because if he eats sugar, all he's going to do is go to his muscle stores, right? So he's one of those guys, unlike the rest of us mortals, that he could get away with all that stuff, but he doesn't, because he doesn't feel right. He doesn't feel well. He gets more inflammation. He doesn't recover as well. So he knows his body. Zach Bitter, the same thing. He knows his body, and he's accomplishing unbelievable feats because he knows his body and he adapts accordingly, right? He may change his diet based on what his metabolic needs are, and the rest of us can learn from that we don't have to sit there and eat 6 times a day when we're sitting at our desk typing on the computer. We're not using that much energy, trust me on that, right? So you kind of figure out who are you. If you're an ultra marathon, it may your needs may change. If you're sitting around doing nothing, then you need to start moving. You need to start doing stuff like Sean does, like 1,000 push-ups in a day, crazy stuff. I can't even think about that right now. But anyways, he's a great guy you're working with.
Yeah, he is. He's a really wonderful guy. He cares about people, it seems, very much so.
He does, you know, and really behind the scenes, I had a chance to visit him. He lives not too far from my mom, and so I've muscled my way in there, and what a great day. It was one of my favorite days, just sitting and talking to him about life and what's important and what's not. And he's a different person than people make him out to be, you know. And that's, I've always felt that way with people who are passionate. You know, their passion comes from seeing the disasters. Could you imagine your job is amputating toes and feet and all this, and you think, gosh darn it, I want to intervene. Then when people tell you you're wrong and they're wrong, and it's hard when you're right and they're wrong to be humble. It really is. I have experience like that where I just kind of shake my head and I say, you know what? I've had 2 diabetes educators. I say, you know what? Let's slap a 24-hour glucose monitor on you, and you don't have to debate me anymore. You go have your ADA diet, and then you have a low carb or a keto diet or a carnivore diet, and see what your sugars do. And both of them called me, and these are big up there, and they both called me and said, oh my gosh, what do I do? What do I do now? Because they saw it wasn't my opinion. That's what it does. The 24-hour glucose monitor changes everything, because when people see it, my patients who have one on, their control is way better than everyone else, because they look and say, oh my goodness, when I ate this food, it goes crazy. If I had a steak, my neighbor who just got diagnosed with diabetes had a steak last night, his sugars dropped. He called me, he's like, my sugars dropped. How'd that happen? Because you're eating steak. You're not eating pasta and bread and fruit juice like you normally did, right? So I think is that when you start realizing, like, oh my goodness, certain fruits you do terrible, some you don't have as much of a problem if they're not carnivore, obviously. So the carnivores are doing great. I mean, my carnivore patients are doing fantastic from a diabetes standpoint, because they're basically emptying their glycogen stores as much as possible. And we always have places we could pull it from. It's sugar is that important that we don't have to put in our mouth. We can pull it from our stores that we've been really good at it with Krispy Kremes and all the stuff we've done for 50 years. Now all of a sudden now it's time to take money out of the bank instead of keep putting it in the bank, you know?
Right. Truly. I understand that completely.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing now. You're depleting your liver. You're making your liver healthier. You're making your body healthier. But you know what? The hard thing is it's a paradigm shift. And you know, so you know, it's just it's funny because I joke with it with some of the docs because we say, you know, like if you're carnivore, you can say this is a modified Mediterranean diet.
Yeah.
Just modified out the vegetables and what others, but it's the Mediterranean diet has a lot of fat content, a lot of meat content, and people don't realize that. They think Mediterranean is like you're eating pasta all day, and that's not true. That's not what the Mediterranean guys are eating. So I think when you start realizing that, I say, okay, what works for you? And you know, it's funny. You can call it any name, you know, and people are happy. If you say the same thing, you're eating the same thing. It's all semantics. So if I say, well, it's keto or it's carnivore, and then people go, oh my gosh, that's crazy. If we say, I'm cutting out processed food. Oh, that's smart. Good job. It's the same. We're doing the same thing. I'm cutting out the processed garbage. Really, was what it comes down to. And then you elect which end of the spectrum you're going to be on. You know, some people are going to say you can never have vegetable. Some people say, hey, if you don't have a problem with it, Sean, I've talked to Sean about it. He goes, if you like avocados and you're metabolically healthy and you feel great and you're good, okay, do what you want to do. He's more reasonable than people think. They think, oh no, you just have ribeye and that's it. You never have anything else ever in the rest of your life, right? But you know, a lot of carnivores, I see what they're eating. I'm like, man, that looks great. You're making eggs and
Yeah.
different combinations, and it's pretty cool. You know, it's cool. I've loved the carnivore. I've always gravitated towards the carnivore community just because like they just say, hey, it's working for me. It's working and I'm feeling good. Well, leave me alone. Don't bug me. Right? Not everyone has to do it, but this is what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. The carnivore community is great. Lots of happy people, really.
Yeah, I think that's what we have to do is gravitate towards the happy people. We have to be positive, and that's why I love the Meet RX. I love that Sean is building a community. This is exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing, because we build a community when you can say, "Look, here was my struggle." What you know, when you share your story with someone and you give hope. In medicine, there's nothing more powerful than hope to say someone else did it. Maybe I can do it. If they can do it, why can't I do it? I mean, she was really sick and look at her now and she's happy and she's helping people. And then those people are going to be the best coaches down the road because they can help people because they're going to say, oh my gosh, I had given up hope. You know, so many times that's what Dr. Unwin and I talk about is hope, the power of hope to say, yes, I can come off insulin. Yes, I can come off medication, but I have to do the work to make that happen. Anyone can run a marathon. I mean, not anyone, but most people can run a marathon if they really put their mind to it. But you don't start out running a marathon. You start out walking and then you do, you know, I'm doing this couch to 5K thing and I'm having fun doing it. But you realize I'm not just going to run a 5K the first day. You gotta build up to that. But as you do it, you get the skills and the tools and realize, oh, okay, I skipped lunch one day and I felt great. Okay, maybe I'll do that again another day. Or maybe, you know, just figure out what works for you. And if you're having success like you're having, that's really great because that gives people hope. It gives me hope. When I hear someone like you having a patient like you, I'm so happy when they come in because they go, oh, look, my joints don't hurt anymore. My back doesn't hurt. And I'll tell you, there's miracles that happen. I mean, if I didn't see it myself, I wouldn't believe it. You know, I have a lady, just as a quick aside, she was going to get, and she lives not too far from me. She was going to get a left total knee replacement. Miserable, sugars out of control. Couldn't give up carbs. Latina, you know, so she liked her chips and salsa and tortillas and wasn't going to give up her flan. I go, look, you got full-blown diabetes. We cannot control your sugars. I can't clear you for surgery. She was on crutches, miserable, crying, begging me to clear. I said, it's not in your best interest. I want to help you, but our options are to put you on insulin or we cut the carbs. And she goes, when do I go on insulin? I go, you're going to gain 30 pounds. You're going to feel miserable. Your joints going to hurt worse. And you know, here's what comes with it. Increase your risk of cardiovascular, everything. Or you could do lifestyle for 6 weeks. If you do 6 weeks and you drop your sugars to a certain level, I'll clear you for surgery. She came in 6 weeks, lost 16 pounds, blood pressure normalized, took her off 2 blood pressure medicines. Her A1C went from 9.2 to 6.2 in 6 weeks. Now she's running the 5 range off all of her stuff. If she would have chosen insulin, her life was over, in my opinion. She chose wisely, and now she's happy. She's hiking the stairs, and guess what the craziest part is? I said, you're cleared for surgery. You made it. Good job. And she said, my knee doesn't hurt anymore. It doesn't hurt anymore. So I called Ben Bickman, and we talked about it. He goes, Brian, the chondrocytes, the stuff in the knee, they start working again. I've had 4 orthopedic surgeons tell me the same. So when you see people, gosh, you go through surgery, put your life at the risk, wouldn't it be nice to change your diet and feel better and not take anti-inflammatories to get rid of the inflammation you're putting in. And that's what Sean's talking about. When Sean was talking about inflammation, I'm like, wow, is that a big problem? And I had to look at it myself and say, he's right. You decrease your inflammation, you do better. You know, in Africa, they're not taking a bunch of ibuprofen and naproxen like we do. It's like in the water here in the US. Why? Because we're inflamed. We got all kinds of stuff. So, you know, having someone like Sean Baker, an orthopedic surgeon, trying to prevent people from getting surgery should tell you something about what he's talking about and what he's seeing. You know, so that's, you know, gastric bypass surgeons who are a friend of mine, they're preventing people from getting surgery. They're hurting their own pocketbook because they can help people. And that tells me there's no conflict of interest, that they're doing the right thing. And a certain percentage of people still will need surgery, but some won't, you know. But the point is, there's enough people that are going to get surgery that if you don't need to get surgery, why not avoid it? Yeah. And that's what's exciting, when you have hope and say, I can do it. I can make some changes. Do I love cookies that much that I'm worth to be miserable every night and to have joint pains and headaches and all this stuff? Migraines get better. There's so much stuff that we see that, you know, it really comes down to the patient's choice. Say, hey, are you willing to do it? And I'm at a point right now, really honestly, in my career, if you're a poorly controlled diabetic and you don't want to change and you just want more meds, I'm not really interested in being your doctor, because it's like being on a sinking ship that's going out to sea. It's like, I don't want to get on that ship. I want to fix the holes and I want to make it better. And I want to make you a better person, because then we can sit and laugh like you and I can do right now, right? You know, how long have you been on your journey since 2018?
Yeah, October 2008.
October 2018. So, you know, in June of 2018, you know, I think, oh my gosh, you're a train wreck. Right now, look at you, you know, so you realize, you know, and I love don't get me wrong, I love the train wrecks. I've had several train wrecks who, once they train wrecked, they get it and they go, okay, that's it. It's not worth it. I want to get my life under control. But a lot of people, we just want to be in denial and go, okay, he's not going to know if I have a cookie and donuts today. And then the next day they do the same thing and the same thing and the same thing. But when people get it and they come in, I've seen people that I've been stunned when I see them, think, oh my gosh, it's not about the weight. It's about metabolic health, right? When they go hand in hand a lot of times, but not always. There's some people who are very metabolically sick that are thin. So it's not about being thin that you're healthy. I mean, people misconstrue that all the time. And there's people who are overweight. I look at their labs, I'm like, you're metabolically healthy, cool. Like, don't worry about the weight so much. Let's put some muscle mass on. Let's stay the course, and we're good. So I think we get so disappointed by this guy. I have a lady. She reversed tons of stuff. She only lost 4 to 6 pounds in 2 months. And so she said, I just stopped it. I go, but your sweats went away, your anxiety, everything got better in your life, and you gave it up. Why? Because you love cookies. That's the reality. Because if you're feeling better and you don't need all these drugs, then why not stick with it? Right? I feel great when I'm working out, when I'm, you know, having time with my family. So why would I say, okay, I don't want to do that anymore? Right? I mean, really getting out in the sun, doing these things, and we can prolong life. We can make life more meaningful, right? And it's not through pharmaceuticals. Sometimes we need them. I'm not an anti-drug guy, but I'm saying, to make that be the solution to every problem, you know, when we know the underlying cause, like what I tell people, and when they're not getting, I'll say, look, I can give you a drug for all the stuff you're complaining about. But the problem is, if I came to you every day and I'm sunburned and I say, can you give me a cream for my sunburn? And you say, okay, here's one. The next day I come back, I need another cream. I need another. It's like, wouldn't at some point you say, get out of the sun? That's your problem. At some point you say, look, I can give you all the creams, but get out of the sun and your sunburn will go away. You don't need all this stuff. But so many people just say, just give me a pill and let me do what I'm doing. And it doesn't work that way. They want the magic. For years, people ask me, hey, doc, what's the magic pill for weight loss? I said, well, before I lost weight, I said, I'm 260 pounds. And if I had the pill, I'd be taking it. There's no easy way out. We got to change what we're doing. But now I know better that it's not just about white knuckle willpower, starving yourself and being miserable. Because a lot of times I say, don't be afraid to eat, but just don't eat the carbohydrates. If you're going to have steak, eat it till you're full. Don't worry. Because those of us who are overweight are very concerned that we might get hungry at some point. So we overeat so we don't get hungry, because there's some fear of hunger that we're going to die of hunger if we don't eat for 15 minutes. You know, we've all been there, done that. So I think once we make ourselves metabolically healthy, then this fear of getting hungry it goes away, because like, oh yeah, I was hungry before, no big deal. I had a glass of water and it went away. It's not like it gets worse and worse and you die. You know, people fast for a long time. So once you realize what's healthy for you and say, okay, I'm feeling well and I'm doing well and my mood is better and I'm a nicer person to be around, there's a lot to be said about that.
So do you recommend fasting, like long-term fasting, or just like intermittent fasting?
Yeah, I'm not a big fan. Don't tell Jason Fung, but I'm not a big fan of long-term fasting. Personally, I've tried it for religious reasons or whatever, or supporting a friend who was doing it for religious reasons. And for religious reasons, I don't have problem with long-term fasting if your goal is mental clarity and to feel well and to be able to really, But the problem is, I mean, I'll tell you, in the church now, and this is one thing I've been talking about. It's impossible to fast. Why? Because everyone's sugar dependent. When you take away sugar, you're starving. You think you're going to be more spiritual in that time? No, you're in survival mode and you're panicked. So people who are metabolically healthy, like a low carb keto carnivore, if they want to fast, it's easy. They're like, okay, I just want to eat for 2 days. It's not a big deal because they can tap into their fats. We always have fat stores. Even if you're a African runner that weighs 110 pounds, they have fat stores they tap into and they know how to do it. So I think fasting is a skill, and I think what you have to do is you just like a marathon, you build up to it. So if people want to do a longer fast, they can. I don't know. I know that I know for a fact, looking at the data and talking to Kirsty Woods, who does metabolic testing, 3 days of fasting, metabolic rate either stays the same or goes up. If that's true, then skipping breakfast is not going to put you into starvation mode and panic mode like everyone says. And I tell you it's not true because I know my metabolic rate and I've looked at it and it doesn't make a difference. So I think what I've noticed myself personally, if I go over 3 days, my stomach gets messed up, and I get cold. So I'm like, okay, my metabolic rate's coming down. I feel it. Like, can I do it? Am I hungry? No, but I still say, let me just do a couple short-term fasts. So time restricted eating, there's zero doubt about that is beneficial. The New England Journal of Medicine just came out with a huge article saying that's the best eating pattern to have, which flies in the face of what the establishment has been saying for 50 years. Eat 6 times a day. Not true. You're not right. Eating 2 times a day, you do better. 1 time a day, maybe even better. But it's really the individual thing. What I tell people is like, look, if you're really hungry, sit there and say, okay, am I hungry or am I stressed or am I mad at someone, right? Or am I just want to celebrate and have a cookie? So look at that and then say, okay, if if you were going to eat a can of tuna fish, would you eat that right now? Right? Are you that hungry? Because for me, a lot of times I go, nah, not that hungry right now. I haven't got that hungry. But, but really not being afraid to eat, especially if you're metabolically sick, because we've all been told calorie restrict, calorie restrict, calorie restrict. You try to do that and you can't tap into your fat stores, you're starving and you're miserable, then you're going to go binge eat. Trust me. I know it. I've seen it so many times. Someone's trying, I'm just going to have salads. And then their body's like, you're not getting enough food. So if you have a steak, guess what? You're not going to be hungry for a long time. If you have Chinese food, you're going to be hungry right away. That's just the way. Everyone knows that. You talk to people and they know that. So I think it's really a spectrum. Do you have to fast? No, I don't think you have to fast. Does it make you metabolically healthier? I think it does. I think we have more. Historically, I don't think the cavemen ate 6 times a day. They couldn't have. They didn't have little stops to get cookies and chips and all that stuff. So I think if people are starting out, my advice would be, look, don't worry. If you're going to eat more protein, if you're going to eat steak, you cannot eat enough steak to get fat. I mean, it's hard to do. I mean, you get stuffed. Even guys I know are putting butter on top of their steak to get enough caloric intake so that they can maintain their weight if they're not wanting to lose weight. So I think most of us don't get that rush from eating a steak. We like it and we feel satisfied, but we don't get that sugar fix that we're looking for. So I think it's a spectrum, and I think most people, if they time restrict eating, I naturally now do 1 or 2 meals a day naturally. That's just, I'm not hungry till then, so I'm not eating, but I do have my coffee with a little cream in the morning. But I'm not hungry, so I'm like, why am I eating if I'm not hungry? Because I'm still on my weight loss journey, right? So we haven't arrived. So maybe when I've arrived, I'll eat 3 times a day, and if I'm maintaining my weight, cool. If not, then I'll go to 2 or 1 or adjust it that way. But it's really feeling where you feel well. Like Tro, my partner on the podcast, and when he first said this, I thought, this guy's gonna lose. You make me crazy. But he tells his people that are really metabolically sick, eat a high-fat diet for the first month. I don't care if you gain 20 pounds, we'll take it off. You trust me on this. Because what they do is they become fat adapted. He said, never be hungry. To tell an obese person never be hungry is like, people cry in his office saying, what do you mean never be hungry? If you're hungry, eat a steak, eat chicken, eat fish, have stuff there, eat a ribeye. He goes, bring your own ribeye, right? If you go into a party, bring a ribeye steak, cook it up and have it. You'll be full and you'll be satisfied. So it's one of those things at the beginning. And then what happens naturally, people, they tell me, I'll never fast. No problem. Don't worry about it. You don't have to fast. Then 3 weeks or a month in, they go, I skipped breakfast and lunch. I wasn't even hungry. It was no big deal to them. It's not this, you have to run a marathon feeling where it's scary, where it just naturally progresses. So I think Jason Fung has a lot of excellent points, and I agree with them, saying fasting is beneficial, especially for us obese people, right? Because you want to burn off the extra sugar that's in your liver. How do you do that? Not put more sugar in. If you're not putting any energy in, your body says, oh, I got to make energy. I'm not going to, get. So for me, if I fast, my sugars go up. It goes up. why I'm fat adapted. My body says, I'll kick out some of the sugar from the fun you had a few years ago, and you can run on that now. Why do we get fat? It's an energy source. We're storing it. It can't stay in the system. It's got to go out somewhere, and the fat's a great place to store it. So those of us who want to get rid of fat, unfortunately, for the love handles and the little belly stuff and the saggy butt, um, the first place it's going to come from if you're on a carnivore diet or a ketogenic diet is the fat stores around your liver and your visceral organs, right? But fortunately, that's the stuff that makes you the healthiest. So if it's about cosmetics, okay, you may have to lag for a little while and stick it out. But metabolically healthy, I've had people lose. One of my patients, he's 78 years old. He lost 1.6 or 1.8 pounds. Normalized his sugars, everything got better on 1.6 pounds. It's not like you have to lose 80 pounds. Like they think if you lose weight, things get better. And the argument I make is it's not the weight, it is the visceral fat. It's the fat around the liver and the organs. And when you get that under control, everything else starts getting better. Then you feel like exercising again. But when you run down and beat up and you weigh 400 pounds, it's hard. Like people say, just exercise more. Yeah, it's nice, but you're not the one with bad feet and knees that kill them, right? You have to understand it because of all the inflammation. You get the inflammation better, then guess what? People start exercising. My lady who couldn't walk and she was on crutches is hiking the bleachers at the school now, and she's going up mountains. She's hiking mountains, and her husband can't keep up with her because now she feels great and she's like just nonstop. Before it was like a torture to have to do it. So I think that's what the carnivore community. That's what you're tapping into, is the mental part of it, the physical part of it, right, and this emotional part of it, all of these things. And it's important to when you're feeling well, guess what? You're a more positive person. If you're hurting all the time, and it's not fun. It's not fun to be negative and disappointed that your pants don't fit you and all that stuff. When you get into that mindset, there, and that's why I love the sense of community, because when you have someone who's overcome that, like Brett and you it's not a job for what you do. It's a pleasure, and that's how I feel now with my job. I love it. I love saying, oh my gosh, look at that, you lost 14 pounds, look at, you're on less insulin, look at your this number got better, your triglycerides are, we got you off these meds, and people can live their life again. I mean, well, there's no joy in saying, oh, you're sicker, I need to give you more and more pills. There's no joy. I never had joy in that. It's like, oh gosh, I count it as a one of the bad consequences of my job that I have to push drugs. Sometimes they're necessary, but if you take people off and you say, okay, now we have more of a reserve, instead of being on 5 blood pressure medicines, now you're on 2. Guess what? We can keep adding those back on if you go back to your old ways. I hope you don't, but if you do, we have reserve now. Before you were maxed out, there's nothing else that we can do for you. So I think the more we say, where can I take it on? Get my insulin right. Let me get my mindset right. Let me enjoy life a little bit and laugh and have fun. And people ask me why I changed career paths. I haven't really changed career paths, just the way I'm delivering it, because I realize I can't work 14-hour days. I can't sleep 6 hours every night. I can't be stressed, not spend time with my wife and kids. And I'm not a good doctor if I'm not taking care of myself. The problem is most docs are burned out and depressed. And the female doctor suicide rate is astounding. It's devastating. These people have dedicated their lives to helping other people, and they're killing themselves. Why? Because they're just burned down the system. They're like, I'm not helping anyone. All I'm doing is working my tail off, and my personal life's terrible. Female physicians, I have a lot of respect because they sacrifice having kids a lot of times. They sacrifice relationship. They sacrifice stuff that is critically important to your sense of well-being. And then you retire and you go, what was it about at some point? Did I really save lives? Did I really help people? Because when you have your white coat that's pressed and nice and you're ready to go save the world and you realize we can't save the world, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming because that's our calling. We'll sacrifice. I know when we do medical mission trips, it's hard to get dentists to go, but docs are like, yeah, I don't care, because they it's worth paying that. They pay their own. I pay my own way when I go, but the rewards we get of helping people and not dealing with insurance and just loving on people, that's what we went into medicine for. And that's what Sean is seeing. That's what we're all seeing, is like, wow, I can help a lot of people, because Sean can help a lot more people through what he's doing, right, with MeetRx than he can with being in the office all day. And that's one thing I realized with my podcast. In my office, what do I see? 15, 20 people a day. Our podcasts, we're going on 2 million downloads. That's a lot of lives we could touch with 1 hour of my time a week or whatever. That is unbelievably great return on your investment, right? It really is.
That is
Because and what you could do is you could reach so many people like that you couldn't do it face to face. But if you have 12 people you talk to and you really impact them and they go out and impact it's a huge impact that we have, really.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you're so passionate about it. And I love seeing that in you. I'm a passionate person too about the helping people, and helping them to get healthy. That's really what my heart is too.
Yeah. And along those lines, it's that when you see it in someone's eyes that they get it, when they get it, you think, oh my gosh, it's like trying to teach someone a math problem. They don't get it. Then all of a sudden they go, oh, I got it. So when I see that in a patient, they get it and they apply it to their life, there's no better reward in medicine to see someone come and go, oh my gosh, remember all that stuff? Last year, all the stuff I had wrong, it's all better. Like, let's just talk about our kids in life. And that's fun. Like, that's social time, right? So that's why I love when you're passionate, because we've seen the devastation, and you felt the devastation. Once you feel the devastation, because I know what it's like. I know it's like when your pants, your belt, you have to drill another loop in it because it's too tight. You know, all those things. Like, no one likes that when you say, "Oh, my clothes are too tight. My suit doesn't fit right." But when you start feeling better, you go, "Wow, my clothes are fitting me okay right now." Right? That kind of stuff. You do better. And then when you're around positive people who are making a difference, the people who need it, their energy hits them. And again, like those of us who've seen the devastation of uncontrolled diabetes, it's such a pleasure to see someone get under, because part of it is we have the pleasure of knowing the disaster that would have happened that we averted. The patient may not even know it, but we know. We have satisfaction of saying, gosh, based on those numbers, here's where they were going to be in a few years. Now they're going to be over here playing with their grandkids. You know, that's what we went into medicine for, to really impact lives. So yeah, I love what you're doing, and thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you coming on for telling all these wonderful things. I know it'll help many people. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Keep up the good fight.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
All right.